If you're Matthew Addison, he unfortunately isn't doing very well at the moment. Oh, Pep Blinders. He's playing a not a blinder. That's what he's doing. And of course, Big Jurg is now going to be his big boss. So the first thing he'll have to do in his new role is sack him.
Yeah. Can't get away from you.
Yeah.
Jobs for the boys, eh?
Vito Matos.
Did I see that right yesterday? He's having a press conference, is he? It might have been one of your pieces I read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's on the press conference?
Jurgen.
In January. Yeah.
Did make a joke about that the other day when it was announced. I was like, imagine.
He will do, won't he? And then he'll
anticipating that they're going to be inundated with requests, so we're just getting a press conference out there.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Blood Red podcast. My name is Keifer MacDonald. I am your host today and I'm joined by Paul Gorst and Ian Doyle. Gorsty, how's things?
Good. What are we now? Sort of close to halfway through the international break. We shall see Liverpool returning to training next week. Thursday, is it normally we get the training pictures, and that feels like a bit of a lifetime away, doesn't it, at the moment? So not a lot happening, but in a way that is almost a story for Liverpool, isn't it? I mean, you had a little chat about that this morning, so we'll get stuck into it shortly. And international breaks are always the worst time for us, and what can you say?
Especially these early ones, Doyle, aren't they? It feels like they are literally every single week. It's safe to say you're not enthused by this October break.
I'm not sure we were starting a podcast by saying nothing's happening, what can we say?
No, but the March international break, there's always the Legends game, isn't there? The charity game that sort of keep us ticking over. September one and the October one, I found it like sort of. Do we need these international breaks?
I always think they could make the November one longer and maybe the March one longer and kind of eradicate them.
Well, they're going to be doing that, aren't they? Soon, in a couple of years, the international break's going to be 3 weeks long, but they're going to have fewer of them.
I'll take it,
or something like that.
Book 3 weeks off.
I'm not sure it's going to work like that, unfortunately. I like the fact that you call the podcast an episode, latest episode. How does it end? I'm looking forward to see how it ends. Yeah,
that's a story.
Instalment, EastEnders style drum roll.
Well, Gorsty, I'll start with you. As you say, not a huge deal to talk about this week in terms of Liverpool, but obviously one of the big pieces of news, not great news, but that news that Alisson Becker has suffered. Well, we know the kind of extent of his hamstring injury now. He's going to be out until after the November international break.
Yeah, we spoke about it on Monday, didn't we? And at the time, sort of awaiting the scan results, and then they came through Wednesday morning, wasn't it? And the bad news is, he's going to be ruled out for 6 weeks and won't be seen until after the November international break. I suppose, in a way, it's good news that this injury has come sort of in between international breaks, because it gives Liverpool the best part of a month for them to recover, during that period, maybe 3 weeks. But he's going to miss some vital games, isn't he? Chelsea, but on the other side of the break, and then Arsenal, of course, at the Etihad, the Emirates, and Leverkusen in the Champions League, Leipzig in the Champions League, a couple of games against Brighton. So it's coming at a really awkward time in terms of the fixtures that are coming up for Liverpool. But then again, it possibly could have been worse had we not been speaking about international breaks and the sort of few weeks that it might give him to rest and recover there. So I suppose you've got to take the rough with the smooth. And I guess, this sort of hammers home the wisdom of Liverpool sort of future-proofing this department with Mamardashvili coming in next summer and whatever else. And I think he's sort of getting into that realm now, Alisson, where a bit like Daniel Sturridge, where you're always sort of eulogising about how good he is when he's on the pitch, but the caveat to that is that you just can't keep him fit enough or get him on the pitch for long enough, because he's starting to miss, considerable chunks of football now. He missed like 3 months last season, all in. Kelleher played close to 30 games, and Liverpool are going to need him again to show why he's got that nickname that he doesn't want, which is the best number 2 around.
Absolutely, and Doyle, Ghosty speaks there about future-proofing that department, but at the minute there's someone who they've got, Kelleher, who can step up and has proven that he can step up. I mean, last season in all competitions it was 26 appearances. I mean, I don't think there'll be too many worries, heading into that game against Chelsea. Obviously with Kelleher between the sticks, he has proven that he is capable, at the top end of the Premier League, isn't he?
Yeah, and well, he didn't play the last time, did he? Jarros had to come off the bench.
Yeah,
so
well, he was ill, wasn't he?
yeah. So that's. I mean, even Kelleher's always been. The suggestion is that he's missed quite a few games for various bits. So he never had a serious injury as such, has he? I don't think so. I think he did do his elbow once or something. I think he did do that. But when he's been needed to be called upon, he's tended to be available. I think, apart from the Jarros game against Palace the other week. It was only last week, wasn't it? Just feels like forever ago.
6 days
It was
ago.
exactly. Yeah. I don't think anyone's got any worries about Kelleher. I think. You only have to see that he plays all the time for Ireland. He played against Finland. They won 2-1, didn't he, on Thursday night? So, no, I don't think... He's already played 2 games this season anyway. He would have played against West Ham in the League Cup, I suspect. But the other game, they kept a clean sheet. I've already forgotten where the game was against. Was it Bournemouth?
Yeah.
Bournemouth. It was Bournemouth,
yeah,
wasn't it? Yeah, it was Bournemouth. So, I don't think anyone's worried. And the other thing on top of that, forget what the fans have been worried about. The other players have played alongside him enough times now, and I know Gorst has mentioned this quite a few times already, but when Kelleher came into the team last season, it wasn't with the first choice Liverpool defence in front of him, but this time he will have that. So I would imagine, even though I think Liverpool, I'm right in saying they barely kept a clean sheet when he was in goal last season on that stretch where Alisson was out, but Liverpool won almost every single game, and it was only kind of towards the end where they got caught up in the game at United, both games at United, and there was the Atalanta one was his last appearance, wasn't it, before the Bournemouth game this season. So no, you wouldn't be too concerned about it, other than the fact that Alisson's a better goalkeeper than Kelleher, but then Alisson's a better goalkeeper than everybody else.
Yeah.
Certainly not a slight on Kelleher, is it?
No, you're going to be looking at it like by the time Alisson comes back, that Kelleher will have played more games than Alisson this season, and that's going to be close to December, which sort of hammers home the point of 2 things really. The fact that, like I mentioned, about Liverpool looking to get the ducks in a row for the long term with the goalkeeper situation, but also keeping Kelleher, basically being insistent that he's only going to be leaving if an offer comes in that he feels right. And I'm sure there's some sympathy to his cause because he's well liked around the camp, and he hasn't done anything to throw his toys out the pram or anything like that. He's remained professional throughout, but he did want to leave, didn't he? And Liverpool could easily have wished him well and said, "You've won us 2 League Cups, on you go and make yourself a Premier League regular." But they've sort of been a little bit selfish and put the club first in this decision, and we're going to see over the next few weeks that it's proven to be the correct one.
And I think in the past, Doyle, there's been occasions with, I think, players like Nat Phillips where Liverpool have been so insistent on getting, whether it would be 15 million a few years ago, and all of a sudden, that they don't get that, and then they lose value at the end. I mean, Phillips will probably leave the club on a free, or they'll get a couple of £1 million for him. But with Kelleher, as Gorst, he says that decision has really been vindicated because, they said if the offer's not right, we're going to need him. He's going to be a key part of the squad, and that'll be proven, in the next, 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks, won't it?
I mean, what I'm quite interested in, do you think that Klopp goings had any kind of influence over a bit more hard-nosed decisions? Because Klopp, one of his strengths could also be deemed by some people as one of his weaknesses, his loyalty to his players and his, not compassion, what's the word I'm looking for?
Empathy
and other such emotive words that I don't possibly fully understand, because I have no emotions, obviously. So, yeah, I think that Liverpool did that. I mean, let's be honest, they did get an offer from Nottingham Forest, which was a bit rubbish.
The risery,
yeah. 9 million plus
Matt
Turner.
Liverpool asked for 8.
And they offered 15 million, didn't they? I think it was in January.
Yeah.
So it's like, how does Kelleher play more games and suddenly got £6 million worse? How does that work? So yeah, I do think that Liverpool have been selfish, but a bit of a hard nose, as I say. I do think that the fact Klopp's gone possibly had a little bit of a say over it, in the sense that they just went, no, we're going to keep him here. We don't, not so much owe him, but they don't necessarily. The people making decisions now don't have that kind of relationship with all of the players at the moment. They will do over time.
Business is business kind
yeah,
of
exactly.
thing.
Yeah, they will do over time. But no, it's paid off. And I think, let's just say Kelleher would have gone. The only way he'd have gone is if Liverpool had got a very good second choice goalkeeper. Yeah. And I suspect this is what Mamadashvili's going to be, certainly initially, because Alisson doesn't want to go anywhere. When we was in an interview with him at the start of the season, he welcomed the fact that they were strengthening and doing a bit of future proofing, because even if Mamardashvili's in not the reserves, but the number 2 keeper for 1-2 years, that's more than enough, and you still get another 3 years out of Alisson.
He's only 23, isn't he?
Exactly. So it's very young for a keeper. I mean, Kelleher is 26 this year, isn't he? So yeah, I think I would be amazed if Kelleher's here this time next year. Let's put it that way. I think one way or another, he's going to be gone. I think he'll do well when he comes into the team, and his value will go up, and then somebody will actually go, well, you know what, we're actually going to sign him. I think he was a bit unlucky this year this summer, I should say, because you had Aaron Ramsdale and Sam Johnson, who were 2 England international goalkeepers who were both looking for a new club. I think they both got one. Where did Sam Johnson end up?
I don't know, actually.
Was it Wolves? It was Wolves. He played against Liverpool, didn't he? That's it, yeah. So
of course, yeah.
And he wasn't very good with his feet, and the crowd were getting really agitated about it. Yeah. So that was one of those transfers that just passed me by. I saw the team, I was like, oh, there he is, yeah. But obviously Ramsdale went to Southampton. There just weren't, because he's a goalkeeper, there aren't enough clubs sometimes, are there, that need a goalkeeper. Yeah. And for Kelleher's point of view, he probably he probably realised a little bit, Alisson does have this kind of recurring hamstring problem, and he is a little bit, not a sick note, but he does get injured a lot more than
for a goalkeeper. He's missed by far the most.
It opens up the question then of, is this because goalkeepers are now asked to do an awful lot more with the ball at their feet, to do a lot more running outside of their area, picking passes, because Alisson picked up his injury from kicking the ball. You know what I mean? So I wonder whether there's something like that. Is it possible to train a goalkeeper to be in the physique of a goalkeeper, but also the physique of an outfield player? And obviously the answer is not for everybody.
Well, he went down, didn't he, Alisson, to begin with? He was down, and then he wouldn't kick it out, or I don't think they noticed that he was down, so he got back up, and then when Trent plays the ball back to him, he just wellies it out because he knows that he's hurt. So it actually happened before. It didn't happen because he booted the ball out, if you see what I mean. But I think it's the injury that he sort of played through in Milan, wasn't it, where he picked that up before the game, and then he wanted to play on, and then he gets injured and misses the Bournemouth game that week, and then the Carabao Cup, which he would have missed anyway. But he was just saying then, Doyle, about Klopp and his sort of, relationship with his players, and sometimes it left Liverpool short at times, and it was, kind of the opposite of what's happened with Kelleher. The one that always sticks in my mind for that was letting Nathaniel Clyne go on loan to Bournemouth in January of, was it 2019, yeah, and just left Liverpool a bit short at right back for no real reason other than the fact that Klopp wanted to sort of stick by his player and give him what he wanted to do. And I think Milner ended up playing at right back for a couple of games that season.
Henderson as well, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Rafa Camacho came off the bench.
Against
Palace,
yeah,
made one tackle.
Milner got sent off. So yeah, it was always the way with Klopp, wasn't it? Sort of, he preferred to streamline his numbers, and if someone wasn't happy, then he was always willing to facilitate that as best he could. And this with Kelleher seems like it's the total opposite.
But having said that, Liverpool have done that this summer with the rest of the squad. They have streamlined it because they do have 2 players for every position. And other than, you could argue, Tyler Morton becomes an extra one in midfield. They haven't got a 7. Well, I mean, how many do you need? But you know what I mean? It's like they haven't got an extra one up front that they can. Possibly Jayden Danns, but he's injured. In defence, who's the next one along after you've got those 8? You don't need millions of players, do you?
Yeah, I mean, what have they got, 4 centre-backs? I was surprised yesterday, listening to the Overlap podcast, and they were talking about United having 6 centre-backs, and they're all sort of, vying for a spot in the first team.
I suppose with United, none of them can keep fit, really, can they?
Who's that then? There's Maguire,
so
Evans, Martinez, Lindelof.
Martinez, De Ligt, Lenny Yoro.
Lenny Yoro, I forgot about him. Yeah.
So, we'll get on to the rotation soon. That was one of my points, but just sticking on Kelleher then, I mean, the defence has been, a lot of talk this season has been about the attack and kind of how that's flourishing, but the defence has really been what it's been built on, hasn't it? 2 goals conceded. Yeah. I just had a little look earlier, and this time last year they conceded 9 goals and only kept 1 clean sheet. So, I mean, it's quite
Remind me of that stat when we finish, because I'm doing something on the defence this afternoon.
But it just highlights, doesn't it, Gorsty, what a change it has been this season. And, I don't think there's Liverpool firing on all cylinders yet, but just that ability to keep the ball out of their net has really propelled them up the table, isn't it?
Yeah, personnel, Doyle just mentioned then about the point that I've made before about having everyone to choose from, apart from Alisson now for the next few weeks, but also the structure of the team. It's not one sitting midfield now, is it? Sort of looking to fill gaps and get about the pitch. It's Gravenberch and McAllister in front of the back 5, and it's a bit more controlled. And it's a structure that's working. You look at the goals that Liverpool have conceded. Callum Hudson-Odoi on a counter-attack with a brilliant goal, which 9 times out of 10 Alisson might have got near or might have flown into the Anfield Road and whatever. And then the lapse in concentration between Konate and Alisson, which an individual error not going to happen every single game, is it? So as a defensive structure, it's certainly working. It's sort of impacting the ability to go forward, I think, at times. Don't think Liverpool have looked too thrilling in recent weeks, but they are doing enough to get the job done, to create enough chances to win games, and that's been borne out by the fact that they're top of the league in the October international break. But certainly defensively, they're not really conceding. I mean, they're not conceding goals, obviously, but they're not conceding chances either, which is the most encouraging thing. So often last season you'd see Liverpool concede first, and then they'd need to fight back, but also conceding big chances that the opposition should have made more of at times, and that isn't happening at the moment. So that is a massive plus point. And we're seeing a fully fit, in-form Ibrahim Konate as well, and we're going to come on to him as well, aren't we, Van Dijk, who I think the pair of them have been superb at the back.
Yeah, if you look at the comparative fixtures to last season, the opening 7 games, I think last time Liverpool conceded 5, this time it's 2. And just generally speaking, I mean, I don't, my thoughts on a lot of stats and stuff like that.
Even other
and the XG and all that kind of thing. But with the XG for Liverpool, last season's overall in the Premier League, I think they conceded the 4th fewest XG per game, something like that. It was like 1.2 or something like that. But then this season, it's the lowest by quite a way, 0.77. And I know you have to put that in the context of who they're playing against, but it does show that what you pointed out, that they're not giving away that many big chances. Because, Alisson, whether it's been Alisson or Kelleher, they haven't had loads of really big saves to make, have they, really?
I mean, Alisson doesn't tend to make huge saves anyway, eye-catching saves, because he tends to do things that negate the need for that, if you know what I mean. Like, he's proactive in his footwork and, whatever it may be. I'd love to speak to a goalkeeping expert to get a little more of a sort of nuanced breakdown of it all, but he doesn't have to make those sorts of saves. But yeah, I mean, Liverpool look really strong defensively, and I'm glad that you've backed up my general thoughts there with some hard stats.
Yes, I did this earlier this week. You should have read it.
I missed that one.
You were a bit busy, to be fair.
Yeah.
Oh, you must have been reading your other 7 articles.
No.
In terms of XG this season, as you say, is Liverpool's expected goals conceded is 5.1. I mean, that's the best in the league. The next is 6.8 of Aston Villa and then 7.2 of Arsenal. I always think when Liverpool were at their best under Jurgen Klopp, that 1920 season, it was because they were so defensively solid, and if they went 1-0 up in games at Anfield, they were happy to kind of, teams were packing up and thinking of their games next week. I think in the latter stages of that last season, especially, that wasn't the case. Even if Liverpool did, rarely go 1-0 up, teams, could still smell blood and still smell that ability. But as I say, reinstalling that, I mean, you look at the progress Arsenal have made in recent years. That's been all down to the partnership of Gabriel and Saliba. In the piece you guys did this week, Gorst, you named Van Dijk as your player of the season so far. Just talk us through that and why you've been so impressed with him.
Yeah, I mean, he's sort of at the form, or he's the type of player where when he's in really good form, you don't really notice it because he's so consistent. It's sort of when he maybe dips below that it becomes a little bit of a thing, and then that's where the sort of over the top criticism comes. But I just think he's been really, really good. He sort of, I think he spoke about this recently, didn't he, Doyle? That there's a new directive on him to not just play the diagonals towards Mo Salah. He's sort of encouraging how to play the vertical passes into midfield, in particular to Gravenberch, who's got a lovely sort of balance and way of turning with the ball, hasn't he? That can get Liverpool on the front foot. And there was a chance at Old Trafford early on before all the goals came in that was sort of, a good example of what I'm talking about, where Van Dijk fizzes the pass in, Gravenberch takes it in his stride, and then Liverpool are immediately at United's back four. And that's a new sort of thing that Van Dijk's doing. I think he did it against Bologna as well to good effect. Possibly the second goal comes from that. And defensively, he's just really good. There's a few times where against Palace and Wolves where the ball's starting to come long, and instead of him just sort of nodding them out for a throw in and then getting back in position, he's bringing it down on his chest and keeping possession, and just looks every inch to be the top defender that he's always been. So I always try to look at Van Dijk because I think he's been great for so long that it just becomes normalised. So I like to sort of focus on him a bit more, just to see that he actually, these sorts of performances shouldn't really be overlooked too easily.
Absolutely, and Doyle, I hate using the word, but he has got a real aura about him again, hasn't he? I mean, you can see that when, opposition strikers, as Gorsty says, they almost afford him the time to bring the ball down because they think, I'm not going to win anything on the ground here, I'm not going to win anything in the air. Might as well just back off 5 yards and kind of retreat. But again, that was kind of what you associate Van Dijk with at his very best, 4 or 5 years ago, 18, 19, 19, 20, he had that real, or I always remember those... a few seasons later at the San Siro, was it Lissandro Martinez when he was like dribbling at him?
He turned and
he just was
like,
like, actually I'm going to cut back inside. But that is Van Dijk at his best, isn't it?
My favourite one of that one was Adama Traore at Wolves, where he went, right, he's going to have a run here. And he literally got about 40 yards from goal and just had a shot.
I'll have a shot,
Just, I've got no chance here. I didn't pick Van Dijk to be player of the season so far. I thought Paul and Beth were quite contrary, which is unusual because it's normally me that's been like that. But I don't think you could argue beyond Ryan Gravenberch because of the fact that he has transformed himself in a completely different, not completely different position, but a position that's pretty alien to him, certainly at that level. And not only does he look like he knows what he's doing, but he also looks like he knows what he's doing, if that makes sense. He has the appearance of somebody that's been there for, plugging the gaps. It's one thing to go, right, I can kind of like get away with this, but it doesn't look like he's doing that at all. It looks like it's completely natural to him, and it kind of suits his game, as Gorsty mentioned about being on the turn and stuff like that. So going back to Van Dijk, I think he has been the second best for me, the second best player. I also, you mentioned then about having the aura. There was what's the lad's name at Bournemouth? Evan Nielsen, is it, that they signed?
Yeah.
The at Anfield for the first 20 minutes, he ignored the aura and just started running up against him and trying to bounce off him. And I think he bounced off him one time too many, and you didn't see him again after that. So teams are again trying to keep the ball away from Van Dijk. We've seen this time and time, whoever it is that's been the other centre back. It was Quansah for quite a while last season. It's obviously Konaté again this season, and because Konaté stepped up, partly because he's not playing as a right back as well.
Yeah,
because Trent's playing as a right back. And I think there's been a kind of a... while that, you can't argue with the fact that tactical decision worked, because Liverpool won one trophy last season, got to one quarter-final, finished third in the league, and should have done a bit better in the Europa League, and they just ran out of players in the end with everybody being injured. And their good end to the previous season came from when Trent switched, so that worked, right? But at the moment, the way that Slot wants to play it, everybody's had, we've mentioned before, you're a striker, Jota. You're not a left winger or a right winger. I mean, you might play second striker once in a while, but you're going to be a striker alongside, you and Nunes are competing for that place. Ellison's a boss star, competing for this number 10 role. So everybody knows what they're competing for. So they've got the kind of, everything's been streamlined, it's been concentrated. They know exactly what they need to do to get into the team. And when they're in it, they're building these proper relationships with each other because they all know where everybody's meant to be. And that comes from work on the training ground, but then also reflected on the solidity that they've got, which we've mentioned about defensively. It isn't just the defence that's defending well; it's everybody, because of the whole from top to bottom, from the front to the back. Everybody has got an idea of what they need to do. It was interesting actually listening to. I can't remember who Slot was speaking to. It wasn't speaking to us. Let's put it that way. He did an interview where he was asked about his, tactics and this, that, and the other, and he said, and it's something that Guardiola did years ago. I remember Thierry Henry did an interview and he basically said, I'll organise you all to this line. It was like the final third. And he just says, and now all of you, like your forwards, go and do what you want. So everybody's got a discipline up until that final third, or more or less. They've got certain positions they need to be in. And then he lets players express themselves in the final third, which is where they should be doing it, rather than messing about at the back and stuff like this. So, that's not to say that some players can't do little tricks or do something, this, that, and the other, because quite often, certainly when you're getting beat towards the end, things go out the window, and you just start doing this, that, and the other. So Liverpool haven't really had that so far. They had it against Forest, which was interesting because that's the one game where they kind of lost the way, and that's because they were chasing the game. And I think that was quite interesting. I think that's possibly one thing to keep an eye on, to see whether Slots saw that and went. Because they've said at the time that I didn't like the way the game ended, not because they got beat, but because there was no big cavalry charge at the end. So there is that. I've even forgotten, what was the question? What was the question?
I think it was about Van Dijk.
I've just started talking about something else completely there. But it's talking generally about the defence, and it's come from the fact that they've set up in a different way, and it's allowing certain players to prosper, whereas Ghosty said earlier, perhaps some other ones are finding it a little bit more difficult. But having said that, Liverpool have still got, Salah got how many goals? Six and 5 assists.
Yeah.
Diaz has got 5 goals. Jota's got 4. There's Gakpo's got two, and he's been playing well, and he played well against Palace. And there's only really Nunes, and even he still scored a great goal against Bournemouth. So they're all still able to do that. And the longer that they get used to the system, the more I think we'll see a bit more of that freedom that Slot wants.
And Doyle, just to stay with you on Gravenberch. I mean, can you recall the players had such a kind of a huge turnaround in their Liverpool career, such a small space of time? I mean, to think of where he was perceived in even May and even in the summer, really in August when the Zubimendi kind of stuff was being discussed. To think about less than a month later he's putting in that performance against Manchester United, and obviously he's built on that from over the last 4 or 5 weeks. Can you recall someone who's kind of done that before?
What I would say about Gravenberch, I think his season last season, he came in and he was like, brilliant, I'm actually playing football, and he started really well, and everyone looked at him.
He came in late as well,
and everyone looked at him and went, he looks like he's a player. And then he got stuck in the whole, I'm in the Premier League, it's November, it's December, it's January.
Where's my
exactly. So there's
I remember Van Dijk saying that as well.
So you get stuck in that. Then he comes around to just around about the League Cup final when he gets injured, and he just started to turn a little bit. Then he gets injured. And then he came back after that and he scored at Fulham, didn't he? And I actually thought he ended the season reasonably well. Like he was kind of going on the up, but I don't think anyone expected him to be playing A in this position and B, do what he's done. I can't think of anyone that's not at the top of my head. No players who've changed position, like Jamie Carragher did it. There's a Sadio Mane went from one wing to the other. So there are instances of players switching position and doing really, really well in it in a very short space of time, but they tend to have been doing all right already. I mean, as I say, Gravenberch was fine. You just said
he would have been a good squad player this season.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think anyone expected
you weren't expecting him to do this, but it is still early days. But as I've said, he went to AC Milan and did it. He went to Old Trafford and did it. And I know Man United aren't the greatest team ever, but Liverpool have historically never had the world's greatest record there. So for them to be able to do that, it augurs well. And even when they lost against Forest, he was Liverpool's best player that day.
And Gorsey, one thing that we haven't seen too much of from Slot in kind of league game to league game is rotation. I mean, I'm sure we'll see much more of that between now and Christmas, and even between now and the November international break. I mean, is it still a bit of a curious case for you? His rotation policy, because we haven't seen a lot of it. I think game to league game, we've seen maybe 3 changes has been the most.
No, it hasn't surprised me really, because Liverpool are winning, and up until maybe 2 weeks ago, they were only playing once a week, weren't they? And look at the midweek games that they've had. Okay, AC Milan in the Champions League away is a difficult one. Bologna at home, not so difficult on paper. And then the Carabao Cup against West Ham, where, changes were always going to be made, weren't they? So, no, I haven't been massively surprised. I think what we'll probably see more of is the big stars not playing 90 minutes every week. I think that's where the resting will come in rather than the rotating. We've seen Trent substituted quite a lot, haven't we? And I think we might start to see that a bit more often with players like Andy Robertson, and maybe a little bit further forward when Mo Salah comes off now and again with games sewn up. We didn't really see that too often, did we, under Klopp? It was either they weren't playing or they played 90 minutes. And it's just going to be something that Liverpool supporters are going to have to get used to, I think. I think this idea as well of if a player misses training, if he's not in the training pitches that come out from a club, it's normally panic stations, and that must mean that they're injured. And I think there will be more, cases of players missing training as opposed to missing match days, which happened recently with Diogo Jota, didn't they? I think there was some concern that he was going to be injured for Bologna, was it? And he played. He basically just missed training so he could play in the match day. And it's just about getting used to these little nuances, I think, going forward. Because Liverpool need to improve that injury record. There's no doubt about that. It was one of the things that undercut them more than anything last season. And if they can keep the key players fitter for longer spells, then they've got every chance of having a really good season. So I think I've been massively surprised by the lack of changes so far. We might start to see them integrated a little bit more in the next few weeks. Certainly, once we get to December time. But so far, no, not really.
The rotation's quite interesting because up until Curtis Jones came in against Palace, they hadn't rotated a single midfielder. They rotated one centre-back, which was after the first half of the first game, where Quansah went out and Canati came in. Up front, with the exception of Salah, they have been rotating a bit there. And I think Salah, the only reason he's played every game in the league anyway, is because Chiesa's not been fully fit. I think Chiesa might have played some, certainly in the Champions League, I should say. Yeah. And then left back, you have seen a bit of rotation with Andy Robertson and Kostas Tsimikas. And right back, I think we will see some. I think Conor Bradley will start playing a few games. I think I think it was partly a matter of just getting Trent back in the groove of playing at a right back again, and so they could see how it would work. And I think now there's probably scope for giving him a rest now and again, because Conor Bradley's been waiting and waiting, and we know he's a decent player and he can do it. And then the goalkeeper situation obviously has meant that there's been rotation there anyway because of the injuries. So I think it's going to be interesting, because they're still in the League Cup, which means you can guess what that team's going to be. Even now, if everyone's fit, it's going to be more or less the same team that played against West Ham. But there's going to be more league games in midweek. They're going to have to start giving players minutes. I've noticed it's interesting that Joe Gomez has been coming off the bench a couple of times lately. Quansah hasn't. So he does Gomez, because he's a bit more versatile. Came on, where did he come on left back? That was at Wolves, yeah. Came on there. Endo came on towards the end against Palace. He did pretty well. Funny enough, I wasn't at the West Ham game. You didn't think he played particularly well then, did you? So you gave him a 5. Anyway.
Yeah, it was the lowest of the match ratings. Yeah, it was one of those where difficult to criticise anyone when you win 5-1, but he just seemed to be in that sort of situation where he just wants too many touches and the rhythm wasn't there. And I suppose that comes from that's the point. That's but certainly of all the midfielders, he's probably one at the bottom of the list of Slot's favourites, isn't he? I think that's fair to say.
Well, that underlines the point. Now they're going to have to start giving more minutes to some of the squad players because they're going to be needed. You could kind of get away with it in the first couple of months. And I know that's another thing where Slot's quite made up with the international break, because Endo played 90 minutes for Japan yesterday.
Yeah.
I'd imagine Conor Bradley will play a fair bit for Northern Ireland. If you haven't played already, sorry from our Northern Ireland listeners. Can't remember whether you played or not. I'm pretty sure you haven't, actually. I think it might be tonight. And there's one or two others trying to think of.
Yeah, well, he wanted Nunes to go with Uruguay, didn't he?
Yeah.
Because he hasn't played a lot of games, and there was talk of them organising a behind closed doors friendly during the international break because of the players who haven't got much rhythm but probably need it. And I think that might have been knocked on the head once Nunes's ban was overturned. I'm not too sure the specifics around that, but it was in the pipeline to play a behind closed doors friendly, with Nunes in mind, to get him some minutes.
I suppose as well, on the flip side of all that is a new manager using his first opportunities to blood the team, to blood his methods. It's not a huge change from what we've seen from Jurgen Klopp, but at the end of the day, he's trying to implement his own style, isn't he, Doyle?
Well, that's it as well, isn't it? And the best way to do that is by having your best players on the pitch at all times. So, as I said, the Trent is the example. I do think that we'll see him kind of rotate out the team a bit more now because he's kind of used to it. It's up to some of the others to step up, because you can't win anything just from picking the same players twice a week or 3 times a week. It's impossible.
What I think is actually good for Liverpool, though, and I mean, you were talking about this morning, Keifer, when we want to come in, that this idea that in the sort of mainstream football coverage, Liverpool are just quietly going about the business and not being spoken about too much. And for us, as journalists who cover the club day in, day out, we obviously want loads of things to be happening and things to write about and chase up and whatever else. But at the moment, I think supporters have got to be delighted that they're sitting top of the Premier League. They've got no major injuries other than Alisson now, but everything's just ticking along nicely. There are no major subplots or storylines beyond the contract stuff, which is a bit of a long-standing issue now. And I think supporters have to be delighted with how things are going, because they're not embroiled in anything, are they? You look at Manchester United and they can't move for negative coverage or what's happening with Ten Hag or anything like that. Liverpool just going about the business nice and quietly.
Especially just early in the season. No news is good news.
No, it's not. No news is not good news. We want loads of news. Yeah, no, we want loads of news and lots of stuff happening. Yeah.
I mean, one piece of news we had early this week, Gorsty, was that Jarell Quansah signed a new contract. Obviously not the headline contract news that fans are maybe craving, but we talked earlier about future-proofing the goalkeeper department. I mean, Quansah's someone who, since he made his debut last year at Newcastle last August, he's really kicked on. I mean, just looking at 35 appearances, he's kind of really made himself a mainstay in the first team, hasn't he? It's a really good business by Liverpool.
Yeah, 100%. And he's almost becoming a little bit of a poster boy for the academy now, because, when you do what you do when you Trent Alexander-Arnold, it sort of almost looked like it was predetermined for your career to pan out that way when you're that good. But for Quansah, I think he surprised a lot of people, because when he come up, I think Klopp was surprised initially by how well he did, because he was basically just thrown into the mix because Liverpool had no other centre-backs at the time. Then Matip was injured, Canate possibly was injured, and Van Dijk was suspended at Newcastle, wasn't he? So Quansah basically took his chance and never really looked back. So I think Liverpool have to look at his rise as like the thing to show others in the academy. You know, that if you apply yourself and you're good enough, that this is what can happen. In the space of a year, he's gone from coming back after the loan spell with Bristol Rovers to on the cusp of England stardom with a brand new contract in his back pocket that reflects his status as a first team player. And he ended the season in great form, didn't he? As Van Dijk's first choice partner, and what is he, 21? He's got a massive future ahead of him now at Liverpool, and the contract is a reward for his progress. Which is the way it should be.
Did you say status?
Status?
You said status.
Did I?
Yeah.
What is it? Is it status?
If you're American, it's status.
Oh,
I think.
okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I know you're a big fan of the wrestling, but come on.
Speaking of the academy, I mean, Trent always felt like a bit of a Hollywood tale. I mean, it's yes, he's a local lad who's made it, but how many lads are going to go on and kind of do what he done and be so instrumental, especially from his position. But Quansah, as Gorst said, he did his hard yards kind of in the Football League. He'd gone through the age groups of England, and he's really established himself. It's perfect business, isn't it, Doyle?
Well, Conor Bradley did the same thing as well. I know they brought him in at about age 15 or something. And Harvey Elliott, I don't know, again, he was brought in for the first team. But he went out on loan, and it wasn't that long ago that when you went out on loan, it was like you're finished, basically.
Yeah.
But there's 3 players straight off that's different. And that's good news for the likes of Kego and Ben Doak, those players who are out on loan at the moment, that they'll think, well, my Liverpool career might not necessarily be over. So that's another way that Quansah's kind of helping change perceptions a little bit. And you're right, because Rio Ngumoa, sorry, Rio Ngumoa. I can spell it, but I can't say it. He obviously switched from Chelsea to Liverpool, partly because of the pathway, because he'd seen the fact that players can go through the academy, end up playing for the first team. I mean, these players aren't soft, these youngsters. They know quite well it's one thing just to play 1 game, 2 games, 5 games for the first team. But the point there is that it's then on them. They just want to have the opportunity, and it's up to, as we mentioned, Quansah when he came off the bench at Newcastle, when he started the game against Wolves. In the first half, Liverpool were getting beat 1-0 and were terrible. But he was easily the best player in it, and all the others around him were letting him down. And I think it was that game where did he get cramp right at the end of it?
Yeah, I think so.
Did he have to go? He had to go off, didn't he? Canati came on, didn't he? I think.
Yeah,
because Canati was an injury concern because he'd had that hamstring problem, and Klopp had kicked off about Deschamps playing him in all the friendlies for France. I think they were friendlies anyway. So yeah, I do think that Quansah, he is kind of that standard bearer for the youngsters now, but also as the example of somebody who's gone out on loan and he's managed to do it a way that's a bit more traditional at some of the other clubs, but hasn't necessarily been that way at Liverpool until really the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I always think with some of the lads that you did play with at the back at Liverpool, you think of like Billy Kemeti, who at one point was Liverpool's youngest ever appearance maker in the Champions League. Reece Williams as well, and a few years, even I know Nat Phillips was a couple of years older than him, but they were had all made that jump into the first team, and there's 3 or 4 lads ahead of him, but he's kind of had that sharp incline over the last. I mean, he would have been plugging away at that for years, but he's had that sharp kind of.
Well, the question there is Quansah better than those 3? And the answer is yeah, and you can tell that already, and you could kind of tell it when he was playing at the academy level, but you don't really know until you're actually playing when you are, especially in that position, because you're coming up against grizzly veterans.
Get your elbows in.
And
wily old
top
strikers.
international strikers, not just, you come up against a lot of kids. I mean, obviously it's multinational at the academy, but more and more likely to be British because of the whole Brexit thing. When you're playing in the Premier League, they're from all over the shop.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, one final piece of news then to end today's episode on.
I thought you said there was nothing happening. We've spoken about loads here.
Yeah, well, I've done a great job at hosting, haven't I?
Come on, let's come on.
I'll come back onto that at the end.
Jurgen Klopp is back in. Well, I say back in football. He never really left, but he's officially back in a role from the start of 2025. He's been appointed as the global head of soccer at Red Bull. Just tell us a bit about his new role and when we might get a chance to hear from the man himself.
Yeah, it's almost a bit of a sporting director role, isn't it? It's the global head of soccer at Red Bull, and I mean, I think the only real feelings from the supporters I've spoken to anyway, at least at Liverpool, is just sort of a little bit of a surprise that he's back in football so soon. I don't think there's any sort of ill feeling to the position that he's going to, and think that it might suit him quite well, because been a lot of talk of him maybe going at a bit of a slower pace with international football, possibly the Germany job, but this is one that suits him, where it's not day to day and it's not 12, 14 hours a day. It's very much a sort of a roll upstairs, isn't it? And we'll see what happens in the future with it. But in Germany, it's been viewed a bit more dimly than it has, certainly from on Merseyside's shore, shall we say. Loads of criticism from supporters of Borussia Dortmund, who feel that the Red Bull model is hugely inauthentic and there's a lack of heritage in football with them and all that sort of stuff. And, that might very well be legitimate. I must say I'm not massively, critical of the decision, because ultimately the Red Bull model is something that's happening in Germany and Austria and, Brazil and New York, and it doesn't really impact what we see day to day, does it? So, fair play to him. He wants to get back into football with a role that's significantly different to coaching day to day. So good luck to him, I guess. But also as well, you can understand why there's some criticism from Dortmund circles. But Liverpool, I've found anyway, I don't know about you two, but I've found the supporters is just a little bit sort of good luck to him.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's that bothered, to be honest, Liverpool supporters. The thing is, he's a former Liverpool manager, can go off and do what he wants. I think some people went, he's once again he's not lived up to his promise of taking a full year out, which is, he didn't say that last time, but when he obviously was at Liverpool, wasn't he, within about 3 months? But it's almost 7 months, isn't it, that he'd have had off, which is a long time, which I wouldn't mind having 7 months
a lot
off.
of paddle,
exactly, yeah. A lot of sun in Mallorca. Yeah, so I also think some people are possibly surprised that he's not gone back into a coaching role, even though he said several times, I don't see myself being a coach again. I think everyone just went, yeah, whatever. But that he's taken this job kind of just suggests to me that he's not going back to club management ever again. And if he does, it'll be, Red Bull have sacked whoever the manager of Leipzig is at the time, and Jurgen, can you fill in for 2 weeks? And even then, he probably won't want to do it, because that kind of undermines the whole thing. I can see why in Germany they're kind of kicking off a little bit about it, certainly at Dortmund. But from Klopp's point of view, he spent his entire time at Liverpool competing against a new structure at Man City. Borussia Dortmund, he spent his entire time competing against this large franchise, not a franchise, but you know what I mean,
FC
a Bayern
Hollywood.
Munich. Yeah, exactly, yeah. So there comes a point where he just thought, Red Bull are not as big as any of these things, but, I feel as though I can make a difference doing it this way. And also I want to see what it's like on this side. So I don't blame him, but then I can also see why Dortmund fans aren't happy. But he hasn't been their manager for a long time now, so... Yeah.
And the game's changed.
Exactly, yeah, it has totally, yeah.
Also as well... They
got to the European Cup final last year.
Yeah,
last season, sorry.
There's this idea that, I think rivals, fans of Liverpool are looking at this as a bit of a gotcha moment, that he's not quite the virtuous, everyman that he was portrayed to be. But to be fair to Klopp, he's never tried to be that. It was just almost the personality that was sort of given to him. And I think, ultimately, all evils in football aren't equal, are they? At the time when the Premier League are battling with their own champions in the High Court about this, that and the other, and nation states are being allowed to own clubs like Newcastle United with horrendous human rights records and all that type of stuff, it doesn't equate to the same thing. So it's a little bit controversial in Germany, I'm sure, but it's not the same as, renouncing everything that you previously stood for about certain topics, shall we say.
Ultimately, everything in the world is bad, but some things are worse than others.
Absolutely, I think that's a perfect note to end today's podcast on. Gorsty, Doyle, thank you very much.
Don't forget,
come on. We've had to wait a long time for this.
NordVPN. A reminder, if you didn't know already, to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. Our link will also give you 4 months off, 4 months extra on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and the link is in the podcast episode description box and the YouTube box description, whatever it is.
Do you reckon there's like a Nord representative who listens to all these podcasts that they sponsor and just waits for them to, get the mention and then clicks off? Because we could put it at the end and we can make sure they listen to our podcast. Exactly.
Just keeping people, the hard listeners,
they
got to wait until the end of the podcast to get the deal.
A few employees at NordVPN who are big Reds.
Yeah. So, but that's all from today's podcast. Thank you for listening.